But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. There are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way.
President Donald Trump just made an unprecedented move. He wants to take over Greenland, the largest island in the world. He named America's first ever special envoy to Greenland, tasked with making Greenland a part of the U.S. The White House press secretary didn't rule out the use of military force for this. Denmark, the country who owns the island, is furious, saying that an attack on Greenland would be the end of NATO. But this is not just between the U.S. and Denmark. It's much bigger. Trump's move is mainly directed at China and Russia. He wants to counter their moves in the Arctic to ensure U.S. dominance in this increasingly vital region. And that's exactly what we're breaking down today. Let's start with Trump's official reasoning. Speaking from Air Force One, the president laid it out bluntly. We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals. If you take a look at Greenland, you look up and down the coast, you have Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need it for national security. We have to have it. Moreover, Greenland sits in an extraordinarily strategic position, right between North America and Europe, smack in the middle of the Arctic. For the United States, Greenland already functions like a watchtower to the north. In 1951, America built the Bidufik Space Base on Greenland, the northernmost military base operated by the United States. This installation allows Washington to monitor potential threats, track missiles, and keep constant surveillance on Russian activities. But now they want to go even further and actually own the place. And this isn't the first time America has tried to acquire Greenland. The United States first attempted to purchase it in 1867, then again in 1910, and in 1946, President Truman offered Denmark $1 million for the island. However, that deal never happened. It wasn't until 2019, in Trump's first term, when the idea was floated again. And now, with this special envoy appointment, he's starting America's fifth serious push. In March of 2025, Trump told Congress, "We need Greenland for national security and even international security. And I think we're going to get it one way or the other." Danish Arctic commander Soren Andersen told reporters, "I think it's fair to say that Russia has built up in the Arctic for the last 20 years. And Russia is a regional superpower in the Arctic. And I think we can see that in the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia, that they conduct operations that we have never seen before. We see that they work together with Chinese Coast Guard ships and so on and so forth. And that brings us to why China and Russia have been so interested in this frozen island for decades. While the world has been busy discussing Trump's Greenland obsession, China has been quietly trying to establish a foothold on the island for nearly 2 decades. And Trump's aggressive posture threatens to completely derail those plans. China's interest in Greenland didn't happen overnight. It all started in 2005, when Greenland's premier, Hans Enoksen, visited China, the first major sign that Beijing was paying attention. In 2011, Greenland's Minister for Industry and Natural Resources traveled to China and was welcomed by the vice premier. Then in 2012, China took it a step further when Xu Shaoxi, China's Minister for Land and Resources, visited Greenland. Nevertheless, China's real ambitions became clear in 2016. Greenland's government put an old naval base called Grundale up for sale. It had been shut down in 2014, and the Danish military didn't need it anymore. A mining company named General Nice Group showed up interested in buying it. But Denmark quietly killed the deal. Why was that? Because General Nice Group originates from the People's Republic of China. Denmark's Prime Minister, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, stepped in, secretly contacted political leaders, and convinced them to take the base off the market. Suddenly, Denmark found new military reasons to keep the base, even though they'd been discussing demolishing it just months earlier. The reason is that Denmark could never allow China to gain a strategic foothold in the Arctic region, and it was becoming very clear that that indeed was China's goal. In 2018, China published its first Arctic policy white paper, where it described itself as a near-Arctic state. And even though it's 900 miles from the Arctic region, it's trying to find excuses to get involved. And in Greenland, China was trying to grab every opportunity it could. In 2018, when Greenland announced plans to expand 3 international airports, the biggest public works project in Greenland's history, Chinese state-owned construction company, CCCC, offered to cover the entire $300 million cost. Denmark saw this for the security risk that it was and chose to fund a third of the project itself. China withdrew its offer. On top of that, China has been involved in 4 major mining projects in Greenland, each designed to secure critical resources. The biggest is in the Kvanefjeld project, which focuses on mining rare earth elements. The Kvanefjeld site alone could meet about 15% of the world's entire demand for rare earths. There's also the Isua project for iron ore mining, funded entirely by General Nice, the Valina project for copper, backed by a Chinese company, and the Citron base metal project focused on zinc, lead, and copper, managed by a Chinese company. But China started facing severe blows. In 2021, Greenland withdrew the license of General Nice after it repeatedly failed to meet agreed deadlines on the Isua mine project. The Kvanefjeld mining project was halted the same year, after the Inuit Ataqatigiit Party was elected. They had promised to block the project because it contained uranium and was too close to residential areas. And now, according to a recent report from the Swedish National China Center, China has essentially quit Greenland. China's presence in Greenland is no longer as strong as it used to be, but Trump's aggressive push for Greenland would deliver the final blow to whatever Chinese Arctic ambitions remained on the island. And this is more important than it might seem. At first glance, Greenland might look like a giant, inhospitable outpost. 80% of the island is covered in ice, and it's home to only 57,000 people. What could possibly make this place so valuable? Well, the answer comes down to 3 things: location, resources, and future trade routes. First up, the resources. Greenland is home to 25 of the 34 minerals categorized as critical raw materials by the European Commission. These include rare earth elements, graphite, platinum group metals, and neodymium, materials essential for smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and defense systems. Trump is trying to boost production of computer chips in the United States, which relies on minerals present in Greenland for production. Furthermore, there are oil and gas deposits along Greenland's coast that haven't been tapped yet. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that there could be 7.3 billion barrels of oil and 52 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in areas off of Greenland's coasts. Studies show that the Arctic region holds about 25% of the world's undiscovered oil and gas resources. Estimates suggest Greenland's total natural resource wealth could be approximately $4.4 trillion. Even excluding oil and natural gas, the estimated value remains at around $2.7 trillion, bigger than the economies of many small countries combined. Meanwhile, control over these resources carries enormous geopolitical weight. China currently controls about 70% of the world's critical rare earth minerals and 90% of the refining capacity. Mining in Greenland is increasingly being seen as necessary in the event that China becomes more hostile to the United States. In that scenario, America would need its own source of rare earth metals. Second, the strategic location. Greenland's location offers the shortest route from North America to Europe. The United States wants to place radars in the waters connecting Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, a strategic choke point known as the GI-UK Gap. The GI-UK Gap has been strategically important since the beginning of the 20th century. During the Cold War, it represented the only available outlet into the Arctic Ocean for Soviet submarines operating from their base on Russia's Kola Peninsula. NATO feared that convoys reinforcing Europe from the United States would suffer unacceptable losses if Soviet submarines could operate freely in the North Atlantic. Today, Russian activity in the GI-UK Gap is intensifying. In 2019, 10 Russian submarines, the largest drill since the Cold War, left the Kola Peninsula with the main task of testing Russian ability to breach the GI-UK Gap undetected and sail into the Atlantic. By controlling Greenland and adding military capabilities there, America could try to contain the Russians. But thirdly, we have to talk about the future of Arctic shipping. As Arctic ice melts due to climate change, new, shorter trade routes are opening up. Right now, ships use the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal to trade between Europe and Asia, routes that are very long and costly. But Arctic routes could be 30 to 50% shorter than traditional routes. Once they become ice-free, using them would be a no-brainer. And Greenland would be crucial for controlling and defending these trade routes. For China, Arctic shipping would solve what's called the Malacca Dilemma. About 80% of China's oil imports pass through the Strait of Malacca, a critical choke point for China's energy security. If ships can go through the Arctic, China wouldn't have to rely so heavily on this vulnerable passage. That's why China came up with the Polar Silk Road project, part of the larger Belt and Road Initiative. The idea is to use the Arctic's shorter shipping routes to connect Asia with Europe and North America. But China realizes that it has to work together with Russia to achieve its goals in the Arctic. Because if there's one country with a lot of power in the region, it's Russia. Moscow has been building up its military capabilities in the Arctic for 2 decades. President Vladimir Putin has made Arctic dominance a cornerstone of Russian strategic policy, developing the Northern Sea Route as the shortest shipping pathway between Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. Russia's Northern Fleet, headquartered in Severomorsk on the Barents Sea, encompasses 2/3 of Russia's total naval power, with close to 80 operational ships. As of 2013, this included approximately 35 submarines, 6 missile cruisers, and the flagship Pyotr Veliki, a nuclear-powered guided missile cruiser. Additionally, Russia operates the world's most powerful icebreaker fleet, 6 nuclear icebreakers, including the 50 Let Pobedi, the largest nuclear icebreaker in the world, plus 19 diesel polar icebreakers. Plans call for 6 more icebreakers to be built. Russia has also established military units specifically trained for Arctic combat. In 2015, Russia built a large Federal Security Service border guard base on Alexander Land Island, capable of housing 150 soldiers for up to 18 months without resupply. The Northern Sea Route currently handles 1.5 million tons of goods annually, but Russia expects traffic to increase tenfold. The Russian government estimates annual cargo could reach 85 million metric tons, potentially accounting for a quarter of cargo between Europe and Asia by 2030. At the International Arctic Forum in Murmansk earlier this year, Putin addressed Trump's Greenland interests directly. He said he believed Trump was serious about taking Greenland and that the United States would systematically advance its geostrategic, military, political, and economic interests in the Arctic. Trump's move threatens to cut Russia off from key Arctic access points. If the United States gains full control over Greenland, it could monitor and potentially block Russian naval movements through the GIUK Gap far more effectively than it can today. But here's the thing. From an ally standpoint, there's no reason for the United States to take over Greenland. Denmark is a NATO member, and NATO is already very strong in the Arctic region. Apart from the United States and Denmark with Greenland, you also have Canada, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland as NATO members. Now, the reasoning is obviously that Denmark doesn't have the same resources as the US to protect and develop Greenland. But Denmark doesn't want to give Greenland away to the United States, and Greenland currently has no intention to become the 51st state. On January 6th, the leaders of France, Germany, Britain, Italy, Poland, and Spain joined Denmark's Prime Minister Frederiksen in an unprecedented joint statement. Greenland belongs to its people. It is for Denmark and Greenland, and them only, to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. Denmark's Prime Minister Frederiksen put it perfectly in an Instagram post. It is a difficult situation that our allies for a lifetime are putting us in. Together with Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen, she issued a statement saying that you cannot annex another country, not even with an argument about international security. Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders, and the US shall not take over Greenland. Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen called the recent appointment of the special envoy to Greenland completely unacceptable and summoned the American ambassador for an explanation. Greenland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vivian Motzfeldt, requested an urgent meeting with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to discuss the US's claims about our country. It is a big disappointment for Denmark, because during the Cold War it was an exceptionally loyal American ally. But Trump's aggressive approach has pushed that relationship to the breaking point. Denmark has tried to appease Washington by massively increasing Arctic defense spending. In October of 2025, Denmark announced a $4.26 billion Arctic defense package, covering the purchase of 2 additional Arctic vessels, a new Arctic command headquarters, a North Atlantic undersea cable, maritime patrol aircraft, and 16 additional F-35 fighter jets, bringing the total fleet to 43. Chief of Defense Michael Hilka called it an assertion of sovereignty that will significantly boost the combat power, flexibility, and Danish contribution to NATO. Previously, Denmark made its largest ever arms purchase of European air defense systems worth $9.2 billion. Denmark also announced a paradigm shift to acquire long-range missiles for the first time to deter Russia. But Trump dismissed these efforts. When asked about Greenland's massive defense investments, he mocked them, saying Copenhagen was effectively buying one more dog sled. Meanwhile, Denmark recently produced the largest military exercise in Greenland's modern history. More than 550 people participated, including more than 70 soldiers from France, Germany, Norway, and Sweden. But notably, the United States military was not invited to participate, a clear signal of Denmark's frustration. But despite the pushback, Trump's campaign on Greenland is going ahead regardless. Recently, Trump appointed Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as a special envoy to Greenland. He's the first ever to serve in this position, with a special task. Governor Landry wrote on X that it's an honor to serve you in this volunteer position to make Greenland a part of the US. On January 6, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt issued a statement that sent shockwaves through Europe. President Trump has made it well known that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority of the United States, and it's vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region. The president and his team are discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal. And of course, utilizing the US military is always an option at the Commander-in-Chief's disposal. Did you hear that? Rewind it 5 seconds and listen to that again. The White House officially stated that military force to seize Greenland is always an option. According to reports, the CIA and the National Security Agency are also getting involved. They have stepped up surveillance of Greenland's independence movement and have been tasked with identifying locals sympathetic to America. Denmark summoned American diplomats 3 times in 2025 over reports of spying and running covert influence campaigns in Greenland. In May, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Director of National Intelligence had ordered U.S. spies to increase intelligence gathering about Greenland's independence movement. In August, local broadcasts reported that several Trump administration members had launched covert influence operations in Greenland, gathering names of those willing to participate in a secessionist movement from Denmark. And the Trump administration is reportedly working on a deal to present directly to Greenland, potentially bypassing Denmark entirely. American officials have discussed offering a Compact of Free Association, a COFA, to the island, an agreement historically extended to small Pacific nations. COFAs let American armed forces operate freely in signatory countries with the added sweetener of duty-free trade. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, made the administration's position clear in a CNN interview. Nobody is going to fight the United States military over the future of Greenland. And his wife, Katie Miller, posted a photo on social media showing the U.S. flag draped across a map of Greenland, captioned "Soon." Behind closed doors, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told lawmakers on Monday that the administration's goal is to buy Greenland from Denmark, downplaying military action. But the White House continues to refuse to rule out force. In Congress, reactions have been mixed. Senator Ruben Gallego, a Democrat from Arizona, introduced legislation to prohibit the use of funds for military force against Greenland. Trump is telling us exactly what he wants to do, Gallego said. We must stop him before he invades another country on a whim. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he doesn't think military action in Greenland is appropriate, and that nobody's seriously considering that. Senate Majority Leader John Thune also rejected the idea, saying he does not see military action being an option. But polling shows Americans aren't on board with Trump's Greenland ambitions. A recent poll found just 7% of Americans agree with a military seizure of Greenland. Nevertheless, Greenland faces fundamental problems: money and power. Today, Greenland manages its own domestic affairs, but it has a budget subsidized up to 60% by Denmark, roughly $630 million annually in block grants. Without the support, Greenland could not keep running as it is. Greenland also needs a lot of investment to finally unlock its resource wealth, which could make it very wealthy. However, if Greenland pursues independence without securing alternative funding, it could become vulnerable to Chinese debt trap diplomacy. A newly independent Greenland low on funds could easily fall into China's hands through loans. If that happens, though, an American invasion is very likely, because America would never allow China to gain a foothold in the Arctic. Currently, Denmark also handles Greenland's defense and foreign policy, and because it has only 57,000 people, Greenland could never keep itself secure from the outside, especially not when it's sitting on trillions worth of resources. It needs a security umbrella from a bigger power, and that can be Europe or it can be the United States. What's certain is that Greenland is now one of the most wanted islands in the world. It's on the wish list of all of the great powers, and the people of Greenland will have some tough decisions to make. But if Trump does manage to make some sort of deal, well, it's going to be bad news for China and Russia.